Good evening. How's everybody doing this evening? Um, so let's start off with a prayer, open prayer. Um, so just close our eyes for a second and take a deep breath. And Father, love and light, we just ask that you can come in and be in this group, and be in this room, and be in our hearts and our minds and our spirits and fill us up. Fill us up so much that we overflow out into other people. Keep me mindful and keep me in remembrance of what happens. And thank you. Thank you for allowing me to remember what happens and being there to intervene when that suddenly happens to me, when I suddenly get the thought to think that I can do this one more time and here's how. Thank you for being in my life and showing me a different way and helping me to remember the consequences behind what's going to happen and the truth behind everything that happens when I pick up anything. Keep my mouth closed and keep yours open. And may I carry your message and not on my own. Amen. So we went over my man Jim and we talked about the suddenly and how this thing is more it's more mental than it is physical, and the reasoning behind that. The second half of the first step of like we got this physical thing and briefly describe that. I pick up, I have an allergy, I cannot stop no matter what when I put something in my body. And I end up in this position where like there's nothing that can make me stop. And then I got this thing where like what happens before that though, where I got this crazy thought of it's going to be different and here's how. And suddenly I get this insane idea that I'm going to do it this way and here's how I'm going to make it work. And I end up in a position where like I was just talking to one of my friends about this a minute ago, and it's just crazy how like I end up in this position where I think that I'll be okay. Here's how, and I don't know when the suddenly is going to happen, because when I'm not carrying the message, I'm not working with other alcoholics, I'm not staying connected, and I'm not trying to perfect and enlarge on my spiritual life, something happens. And I have to believe every day that if I pick up a drink, something happens. Do I believe that right now? Do I believe that if I pick up a drink right now, that something will happen? Yes, I do. I do. Something will happen. I'll be absolutely unable to stop no matter what happens. And then I end up in this position where like, I'm like, okay, you know what? Something happens and I'm not staying connected and I'm not doing the program. I'm not staying connected to the fellowship, nor am I helping others, nor am I trying to perfect and enlarge on my spiritual life. And all of a sudden I end up in a position, and it's not even a thought process like we described last week, where I might be justified and go out and deliberately get drunk by feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, or jealousy. I don't even have to have that. I end up in a position where like I'm not connected, I'm not staying around, or I start to miss something and I start to think that looks cool over there, and I fall for the illusion that I'm like them. And I'm like, these people are like me too. And I fall for the illusion. They are the illusion. And I fall for the delusion that I'm like these people too. And then I end up in a position with a drink in my hand, and then I'm not able to stop. And then I tell myself, well, I'll be able to hold on to stuff. And I'm like, well, I got a job. I can't go to treatment because I got a job and I got a car and my girlfriend and all this other stuff. But all that stuff's going to go in anyway, especially if I end up dead or in prison. And it's not a prophecy. That's exactly what happens each and every time when you're the real deal. I am the real deal, and I identify with being a real alcoholic today. And I end up in this position where I'm trying to get separation. And like, even if I end up in that position where I'm like, you know what? I want separation. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. I feel like I'm going to die, or I don't want to feel like this. I'm hurting people. And I end up in a position that I want separation. nothing is to guarantee me that I'll get connected again or even get separated. Because even though I make a decision to go to rehab, I get there and 10 minutes later, I think to myself, you know what? I over-exaggerated. It wasn't that bad. I don't need to be here. You know, and all these thoughts are just going nuts. Like, you got home, family, you know, you got to do this. You got a job. You're going to lose your job. And then I fall for the idea of that I'm going to go out this time and I'll be okay. But even if I do get separation, nothing is to guarantee me. It's still extremely difficult, even with the separation from drugs and alcohol. There's nothing to guarantee me but him to stay connected and stay helping others and work the program to the fullest to protect me from the suddenly, where I've been placed in this position that the book talks about, safe and protected. And I end up in that spot where, like, the suddenly happens. There's nothing to say that won't happen to me, even with separation. I get out of rehab. I just did, let's say, even 6 months to a year, usually in a prison rehab for me, and I get out, and all of a sudden this suddenly happens. That is scary to me. I don't ever want to be in that position where I'm disconnected from God and I'm disconnected from my fellow man and trying to help. Cool thing is, like, people go to church, and this is what we're doing in this work. People go to church and they look for God. That's what you go to church and you know what you're going there for. You're going to hear a message, and you know you're going to hear about God. And the cool thing is, here we help people find God, and they ain't even looking for him. They ain't even looking for him. So we're talking about not remembering the consequences, where I end up justifying it, right? And even in that type of beginning, we talked about how we're obliged to admit that our justification for the spree, we're in the middle, and we had the 5 ideas, the 5 times that suddenly happened to me, where that all of a sudden, you know, I get this thought and I believe the insane lie, it wins out, and I use again even when I'm sober. Piss clean, blood is clean, take a hair follicle, there's nothing in my system, and I end up in a position where all of a sudden I get this thought and I believe it. Clean. So therefore, physically I feel fine, mentally I feel great, but I still happen to get this phenomenon, this suddenly out of nowhere, this is how you can do it, and I believe the lie and I use again. So therefore, it's important for me to stay connected. You know, it's a lot more than just not using. It's much more than just, oh, you know what, I'm just going to go to meetings and not use. This is the most unbelievable life I've ever lived. So we're in that part of the first step where we're talking about the mental twist. So we're at the bottom of page 37. Our behavior. And we'll go up to the paragraph before that. Justify. In some circumstances, we have gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or the like. But even in that type of beginning, where, oh man, I did it because of this, or my such and such passed away and I was like feeling alone or whatever. Even in that type of beginning, I'm obliged to admit that my justification for a spree was insanely insufficient in the light of what always happened. I'm going to jail, I'm going to die, I'm going to lose everything, and bare minimum mental and physical suffering. So we now see that when we began to drink deliberately instead of casually, there was little serious or effective thought during the period of premeditation of what the terrific consequences are going to be. I'm not even thinking about it. There's times where I just end up in a position there I don't even have, just like we just talked about. Our behavior is absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink that suddenly, as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. Now, the jaywalker isn't a real person. It's kind of like a story that they came up with. But I can probably say that there probably is an individual just like this that is alive today. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself after a few years in spite of friendly warnings, people telling him to stop. Up to this point, you will label him a foolish guy for having stupid ideas of fun. Luck then deserts him, and he is slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently, he is hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley breaks his arm. He tells you, I'm done. I've decided to stop jaywalking for good, and I'm not even going to be on the streets. But in a few weeks, he breaks both legs. On through the years, his conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promise, I am never going to do this again. I'll be careful, or I'll keep off the streets altogether. I'll control and enjoy it. Finally, he can't work anymore. His wife gets a divorce, and he's held up to ridicule. He tries every single known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, goes to rehab, detoxes, therapy, counseling, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he comes out, the day I get out, mentally fine, physically fine, I race out in front of a fire engine which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? Question mark. So you got this, the jaywalker, and even as an alcoholic and a drug addict, I look at this dude like, what an idiot. You know, this guy is a freaking, he's a nut. And the truth is, that's how the outside world and the normal people look at us. Because they don't know about the disease. They're not aware of the illness. They're just like, yo, why don't you just stop? Like, quit. Like, what is wrong with you? Why don't you just quit? That's how the outside world looks at us. Like we look at the jaywalker. You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? Question mark. We who have been through the ringer, we're talking about people who have been through the ringer. We who have been through the ringer, I've been through the ringer, have to admit that if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects, where alcohol and drugs have been involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? Absolutely. So, from here through Fred's story, we're going to talk about there's some people who have this spot where like, oh, well, I didn't, okay, and they hear my story and they're like, oh my gosh, like I ain't been to jail and I ain't been to like all those detoxes and rehabs and stuff, and I damn sure ain't OD and die so many times or put myself in that position so many times. We're talking about like the like part 2 of the stories type people, and people would hear my story and identify with the consequences that I had instead of the mental twist. So people that are hearing the story that aren't aware of the situation, you know, and unaware of what they're trying to identify with, would say, you know what, I'm not like this guy, I probably don't belong here. But like I said before, we got tons of people. I know tons of my friends who have amazing lives, amazing upbringings. They didn't grow up in Newcastle. None of that stuff happened in their lives, yet they have the same thing I got. They put one in them and absolutely are unable to stop. So we got a story for you, you know, who think that, oh, I ain't had to go through all that stuff. Here's some information for you just to identify, like, you don't have to go, the consequences don't make you an alcoholic. It's not the behavior, it's the allergy that makes me an alcoholic. Some of you are thinking, yes, what you tell us is true, but it don't fully apply to me. We admit that we have some of these symptoms, but we have not gone to the extremes that you people did, nor are we likely to. For we understand ourselves so well after what you have told us that such things cannot happen again. We have not lost everything in life through drinking, and we certainly don't intend to. Thanks for the information. Deuces. That may be true of a certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate heavier moderate drinkers because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, and I underline and highlight this, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge, no matter how much I learn. And I write next to that everything in the book to this point. So everything in the book up to this point is not enough. Is not enough knowledge. And we learned a lot. All this stuff, this is like our 6th or 7th group here. And it's like, it's not enough. It still isn't enough. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize, to smash home. When I think about smashing home something, I'm talking about, we already talked like Loki in the Adventures. You know, to smash home upon our alcoholic readers as it has been revealed to us, and this is cool, out of bitter experience. Yeah, I've had some bitter experiences. Let us take another illustration. Fred, underline Fred. Fred's real name, this is a real guy, this is a real story, these are real events that took place. Fred's real name is Harry B. Harry B actually sued Alcoholics Anonymous, tried to anyway, because they used his story. I'm not sure what he got, and you know, whatever the deal was with that, doesn't matter. So Fred, Harry, is partner in a well-known accounting firm. Now check this dude out. Now look at the stuff that's going on in his life. Good income, fine home, happily married and father of promising children of college age. Such an attractive of a personality that he makes friends with everybody. If ever there's a successful person, it's Harry, Fred. To all appearances, he is stable and a well-balanced individual, yet he's an alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he had gone to recover from a bad case of jitters. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed. You can underline ashamed because this is Fred's bottom. He's ashamed. He's much ashamed of it. Far from admitting that he's an alcoholic, though. He told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. You know how many times I went to detox, 70 pounds underweight, never freaking even been home for the last 6 months, probably ain't showered in weeks. I ain't had a hot meal or any type meal in months. And then I get to rehab and I'm like, nah, man, I'm just here to rest my nerves. I sell drugs. We are insane, man. So the doctor intimated strongly that he might be worse than he realized. Nah, man, I'm just here to rest my nerves. I don't know, bro. You might be worse than you realize. For a few days, he was depressed about his condition. He made up his mind, right? Because he has the power to do that, so he thinks. He makes his mind up to quit drinking altogether. I'm done. It never occurred to him that perhaps he couldn't do so. In spite of his character and standing. Of course not. Those stories intrigue me because I'm like, I don't know if I could. Ashamed is not my bottom. You know, I don't hit bottom. I keep digging. Like there is no bottom for me. Bottom raises up. He raises, you know, his character and standing. He has everything. His life is amazing. Of course, he wouldn't think that he's an alcoholic. Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, much less accept the spiritual remedy for his problem. We told him what we knew of alcoholism. He was interested and conceded that he had some of the symptoms, but he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. Powerful dude. He was positive that his humiliating experience, plus the knowledge that he acquired from the KEEP program from the knowledge he acquired would keep him sober for the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it. We heard no more from Fred for a while. One day we were told that he was back in the hospital. This time he was quite shaky. It's a little bit different. He soon indicated he was anxious to see us. The story he told was most instructive, for here was a chap absolutely convinced that he had to stop drinking, knew he had to stop. He had no excuse for drinking, and there's no pressing problems or worries. He exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all other concerns in his life, yet just like me, he's flat on his back nevertheless. It's not the behavior that makes me a drug addict and alcoholic. You know? It's not the behavior, it's the allergy. Let him tell you about it. So, I was much impressed, and this is Harry. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly didn't believe that it was possible for me to drink again. Me too, brother. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity, the suddenly, which precedes the first drink. But I was confident it could not happen to me after what I learned. Man, I can't tell you how many times I've been that dude. I reasoned I was not far advanced as most of you fellows. I don't shoot it. That I had been usually successful in licking my other personal problems, and that I would therefore be successful where you mother effers had failed. I felt I had every right to be self-confident. I would have too, in all honesty and respect. Me too. That it would be only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. In this frame of mind, I went about my business for a time. You can underline time. On top of it, you can write a year. It was about a year. All was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks, and I began to wonder if I had not been making too hard of a simple matter. One day, I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. You're talking about big money stuff. You're presenting anything to the government bureau, and you're talking about money. I had been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about that. Physically, I felt fine. Neither, and I underline this, neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased and knew my partners would be too. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. We're on the first paragraph of page 41 if you're just joining us. End of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. So much for triggers, right? You stay away from everyone. I remember I had the index cards from the Kurt Lauren Theory workbook, the Terence Gorski workbook, and I had all these index cards and triggers and stuff, and I was like, I can't go pretty much anywhere. I can't talk to anyone, and I have to freaking go isolate in the center of the earth if I'm not to drink again. Triggers ain't it. My trigger, I woke up. That's it. I woke up. That's all I need. It can be a great day, a beautiful day, horrible day. Doesn't matter. We do it anyway. I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. This is very important, so stay with me. As I crossed the threshold, you can put in brackets or underline cross the threshold, and above it write suddenly, because that's the suddenly. As I crossed the threshold to the dining room, the thought, underline thought, came to mind that it would be nice, underline nice, to have a couple of cocktails, underline couple of cocktails, with dinner. That was all, nothing more. I ordered a cocktail and then my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail. I said I was going to have a couple. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck, underline struck. It struck me a highball, underline highball, would be fine, underline fine, before going to bed. So I stepped into the bar and I had one. I remember having several more, underline several more, and write craving next to it. It's the phenomenon of craving. Several more that night and plenty the next morning. I have a shadowy recollection of being on an airplane bound for New York and of finding a friendly taxi cab driver at the landing field instead of my wife. The driver escorted me about for several days. I know little of where I went and what I said and did. Then came, and underline this, the hospital with unbearable and mental physical suffering, and next to that, write truth. So Went to my hotel, leisurely dressed for dinner. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it'd be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. Ordered a couple cocktails in my meal. Ordered another cocktail. After dinner, decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine before going to bed, so I stepped into the bar and had one. I remember having the phenomenon of craving, and several more came up that night and plenty the next morning. I have a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York. You're talking about a dude. Now, Fred has everything worthwhile in life, no pressing problems or worries. His life is amazing. Kids, college age, great childhood, great upbringing, great family, great job, white picket fence, all that stuff. And he got the same thing I got. He drank like me. He had one and don't even remember where he was at for days. He don't even remember where he was at. He was running around with a taxi cab driver. He can't even tell you what he said and did. Just like that. Yet his outside life, right? Everything out here looked fine. Crazy stuff. So pretty much this is what I do. Suddenly, right? This is the stuff we underline. Suddenly, I get a thought, nice, couple cocktails. Thought, nice, couple cocktails. Right? That's it. Thought, nice, hit a crack. Thought, nice, bag of dope. Right? That's it. And my thought tells me this is nice, and I contribute a drink, couple cocktails with nice. That's what my brain's telling me. This is before. We're talking about no pressing problems or worries. Everything's fine in his life. Thought, nice, couple cocktails. And then as soon as that happens, it strikes me a highball is fine, right? Because now it's fine. Highball, fine. Highball is, let's just say 8-ball. It strikes me 8-ball, fine, you know? And then several more, phenomenon of craving. And then the truth, hospital and unbearable mental and physical suffering. That's our whole lives. If you like me and you the real deal, that's the same thing that you go through. Thought, nice, couple of drinks. Thought, fine, 8-ball, unbearable mental and physical suffering. As soon as I regained my ability to think, we're at the bottom of 41 now. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time, I had no thought, I not even thought of the consequences at all. Didn't even think about it. I had commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. There isn't no, Matt, you're going to do this and you're going to jail for the rest of your life, or Matt, you're going to die tonight if you do that. That shit I don't even think about the consequences. It doesn't even come up. I didn't even think about them at all. I commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I now remember what my alcoholic friends had told me, how they prophesied. And let me explain, it's not a prophecy what happens to us. Jail, institutions, death, they're just the consequences that happen to us, especially with the heroin epidemic that's going on now. That's just what goes on. It ain't even heroin, the fentanyl epidemic. It's not a prophecy. If you ain't doing this and living this life, man, and you ain't like trying to stay spiritually connected and grow spiritually, this is what happens. It's not, look, if you've been in recovery for a while, just look around you and you'll see. What did they not do, you know? And he had prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, if you were the real deal alcoholic, it's up to you. The time and place will come. I would drink again. They had said, though I would raise a defense, it would one day give away before some trivial, some small, minute reason for having a drink or a drug. Well, just that did happen, and much more. For what I had learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment that I had an alcoholic mind. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help me in those strange mental blank spots, suddenly. Those strange mental blank spots. There's no form of treatment to help me in those strange mental blank spots. Doing therapeutic communities, key programs, counseling, and detoxes aren't going to help me in those strange mental blank spots where I think thought nice couple cocktails. Fine highball. There's nothing that'll help me. I don't think about the consequences at all. We're talking about the mental phenomenon. This is crazy. Only can help me with that. Thank you for helping me with that. I had never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow because it had me hopelessly defeated, is what he's saying. Check this out. 2 of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned, which I ain't like so much. So they're not grinning because they're like, I told you. They're grinning because like, yeah, we know, man. We know. Me too is what they're saying. They grin, which they ain't like so much. And they asked me if I thought myself an alcoholic and if I were really licked this time. 2 questions. Do you think you have this? And do you think you're really licked this time? That it whoop your behind this time? I had to concede with both propositions. Yes and yes. Check this out. I highlight this. They piled on me heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic mentality such as I exhibited in Washington was a hopeless condition. This is important. They cited cases out of their own experiences by the dozens. We're talking about cement now. We're talking about they're talking about war stories, and they're just like in working with others, right? It talks about being humorous and stuff like that with it, because like we're not going in there like, yeah, man, you need to stop. Like I'm telling you from my own experiences why. I'm telling you, yeah, man, man, this one night, man, I remember, and I can. It is kind of funny now. I'm on my way to the PO. This is some funny stuff. I'm on my way to the PO and I get this strange thought that suddenly happens, and I'm like, she's not going to piss you this week. I get pissed every week. What are you talking about? And I believe it, and I go and get the urine and fail the urine. It's insane. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's a funny story, and people relate to that. So that's what they're doing. They're telling their stories, man. They're citing cases out of their own experiences by the dozens. This process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself. Because by citing out the cases, they're explaining to each other that we're just like you. Here's how. Check this out. I tried this and tried that. And of course, an alcoholic is identifying like, yeah, me too. This process snuffed every flicker of conviction I could do the job myself. Good. That's where we need to be. I can't do this, man. I need help. I need power. And not human power. They outlined the spiritual answer and program of action, which 100, you're talking about millions now, of them had followed successfully. Millions of people followed this successfully. Though I had been only a nominal churchman, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow. But the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. It meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. Selfishness and self-centeredness. I got this. Power. Self-knowledge. That was not easy. But the moment I made up my mind to go through with I highlight this. This is important. But the very moment I made up my mind to go through with the process, where I came to that full point of surrender, not just a desire to stop using, but I fully surrendered that, okay, I have a desire to stop, and I believe and surrender that to the fact that this is the way. The moment I made up my mind to go through with the process, I had the curious feeling that my alcoholic condition was relieved. As in fact it proved to be. It's my story, man. It's not my story, but it is my story. It's all of our story. Quite as important was the discovery that these spiritual principles would solve, underline this, all my problems. Doesn't say solve my drug and alcohol problem. Spiritual principles will solve all my problems. Girlfriend leaves, when I got a girlfriend, if she leaves, okay, I guess God's done with me in your life. I lose a job, I get another one. I'm okay, no matter what happens. I stay in this fit spiritual condition, and I can go through anything. I have since been brought into a way of living infinitely more satisfying, and this is my truth as well, and I hope more useful than the life I lived before. You're talking about a guy who had everything. Remember in the beginning of his story. Remember college age and kids college age, father, promising children, good business career, successful dude. Everybody likes him. He has a family. Everything's cool. His life is amazing. He can successfully beat all his other problems. And he found a life that's more beautiful than that? Yeah, because it ain't about this stuff in here. He found something in here. My old manner of life was by no means a bad one. Remember, he had everything. But I would not exchange its best moments for the worst that I have now. I would not go back even if I could. Me either, man. Whew. Me either. Me either, man. Wow. Fred's story speaks for itself. We hope it strikes home to thousands like him. He had felt only the first nip in a ringer. He felt the nip. He didn't have to go through the ringer like all of us, but he identified that I am an alcoholic and I can't stop. Most alcoholics like myself have to be pretty badly mangled before they really commence to solve their problems. Many doctors and psychiatrists agree with our conclusions. One of these men, staff member of a world-renowned hospital, you need scientific evidence here, recently made this statement to some of us. What you say about the general hopelessness of the average alcoholic's plight is, in my opinion, as a doctor who is a world-renowned hospital, in my opinion is correct. As two of you men whose stories I have heard, there is no doubt in my mind that you are 100% hopeless apart from divine help. Does this sound like you? Had you offered yourselves as patients at this hospital, I would not have taken you if I'd been able to avoid it. People like you are too heartbreaking. Though not a religious person, I have profound respect for the spiritual approach in such cases as yours. For most cases, underline, highlight, star. For most cases, there is virtually no other solution. If you're saying, oh, well, I don't know about that, go try. Go try and let me know. I am confident that I have tried every possible way for my own personal experience. But everybody has to have their own. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must highlight, circle, love it. His defense must come from a higher power. Higher power isn't, it's right here in black and white. It's not so, when we're trying to get you, and just bear with me if you're not ready for that. Just keep coming and we'll make a decision later, but my own personal experiences. There was no human power that could help me. None of them. I tried all of them, even together, all as one. Even human substances weren't enough. I didn't even get relief from the drugs and the alcohol anymore. They weren't even providing relief for me anymore. There's no human being. When it's talking about higher power, we're not talking about anything human. His defense must come from God, higher power. No one can help me in that mental blank spot but him. Nobody else. Let me see what we're looking at, man. Cool. So, I can't explain to you how many times that I thought that I found a way and I tried this human power and that human power. I tried her and then I tried them and then I tried wife and the therapist and that didn't work. And then I tried this substance, and I tried, let me just go over here, let me get out of town, and I tried every possible thing and nothing has worked for me. So we're about to move into a second step now. So when we agnostics isn't about like it's cool to be an agnostic, like it's okay. And even in the first, we're talking about the first two let's just do this. So Gnostic is one's with truth. That's what Gnostic is. So agnostic is one's without knowledge. So it's one with knowledge and Gnostic, and then one without knowledge. So, okay, you got a believer. I'm a believer. Me, I have undeniable evidence for myself and in my own life that God exists. I have undeniable evidence in my life that he exists. And there's a lot of us that are believers, and that's what we'll tell you. We have undeniable evidence of what God did for me, and we'll tell you all about it, and we'll talk about it often. I talk about it regularly, And then you got an agnostic who's kind of like, I don't know, show me proof, I don't believe, I don't disbelieve, show me some proof, and I'll make a decision, And then you got an atheist. An atheist is like they believe. The way to sum it up would be, I believe that God doesn't exist, or I can prove that God doesn't exist, which is impossible. But that's just what it is. So you got a believer, undeniable evidence of God, myself, and it took going through this work. I wasn't always a believer, but going through this work woke me up in my perspective and my connection and my relationship, and also my conception of God has changed over the time. And it continues to get better because I love to grow spiritually. And what better to live for, What better can I do than like to sacrifice time and be in service to God and give my life up to the person who gave it to me, Then you got the agnostic who's like, I don't know, man. It's kind of like up in the air. Then the atheist is kind of like, I don't believe, man. But over time, if you're in these rooms, and you're part of like good groups, and you're like doing this thing, and you're at least trying to give it your all, it ain't going to be long before something happens to you, and you start to just and it's usually in other people. You start to recognize it in other people, and you're like, whoa, that's unreal. Like, why did he do that? So it comes from a biblical word, gnosis. Gnosis was like believe they were like, this is just stuff we come up with. It was like a Christian group in history. The gnosis, it's a biblical word, gnosis. So the Gnostics were like these Christian. It was like a Christian group in history that is just like regular information, stuff that I read about or whatever. So, and then you got like these people who some people think that they were the ones that hid the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah, and have you ever seen Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they opened the Ark up and like the Germans had the Ark, and some people even say like that was Hitler's true conquest, was to find the Ark of the Covenant, which is known supposedly to have all knowledge and power in it. So that's like some people think that that's what his real deal was. So we'll just start with the first chapter of this, and we'll kind of end because I don't want to move into it right now. Actually, we can. Let's do it. In the preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism, have you not? We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. Have we done that? If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, does that sound like you? Or when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, does that sound like you? You are probably an alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. What can you say? So check this out. To the one who feels he's an atheist or an agnostic, such an experience seems impossible, right? It's like, I don't know about this, but I don't know. I'm not believing. But check this out. But to continue as he is with this alcoholic dilemma means disaster. It means disaster, especially if he's an alcoholic of the hopeless variety like myself. To be doomed to an alcoholic death, and this is what it's saying about the atheists or the agnostics, man. You're going to be doomed to an alcoholic death, right? Or live on a spiritual basis. It's not always easy alternatives to follow. But it isn't so difficult, believe me. About half of the original fellowship were exactly of that type. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope that we were not true alcoholics. Remember that? I ain't no drug addict. I ain't alcoholic. What you talking about? But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must, circle must, find a spiritual basis of life or else. Face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life or else. Perhaps it's going to be that way with you. Cheer up. Something like half of us thought that we were atheists or agnostics, including myself. Our experience shows that you not need to be disconcerted. Disconcerted means, I had to look this up too, it means unsettled or confused. So you need not to be unsettled or confused about it. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, if I just changed my morals and I had a better philosophy of life, and that would have overcame alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago, including myself. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all of our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. Lack of power, underline. That's the spiritual malady. Lack of power. That is the spiritual malady. And I have lack of power, and it becomes a dilemma because I got problems with God. That was our dilemma. Remember, dilemma. Problem, no water in my, dilemma, 2 kids in the water. They're twins. They're your kids. They're both drowning. Pick one. 2 equally unfavorable options. A dilemma. Lack of power. That was our dilemma. We had to, if you have to do something, you got to do it. We had to find a power which we could live. And it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Obviously. What a beautiful freaking sentence. Obviously, period. But where and how were we to find this power? Where do I find it at? Where do I get this? Well, let me tell you something. That's exactly what this book is about. You want to highlight and underline and hyphen this. That's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Unbelievable. It tells me what the whole book is about right there. That's exactly what the book is about. That means we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, that we are going to talk about God. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to a new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship, but his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God. I remember that. For we have reopened the subject which our man, including myself, thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored. We're going to stop there. We'll probably brief over this again because I want to be sure that we are clear on we agnostics. So I hope you got something, man. We'll be back to We Agnostics on what's today? Tuesday, Saturday. We'll go back to We Agnostics. You guys have a beautiful and amazing evening. We're getting ready to move into some step 2 stuff. You know, step 1, I have this disease that tells me I don't have it, but I'm the only one that can tell you that I have it. That's a rock in a hard place. It's a tough spot to be in. I got something that tells me I don't have it, but I'm the only one that can acknowledge I have it. Physically, we know what that looks like. I use and I cannot possibly stop. And then mentally, what happens to me before I use, though, before I even put a substance in my system and the phenomenon of craving has developed, I get this sudden thought, this mental blank spot, this strange mental blank spot pops up and I go and use. It's unbelievable, you know. I end up with a beer in my hand. I'm like, what the, I'm just, you know, cut the grass, beer, nice, you know. And then all of a sudden I'm gone for 3 days and nobody's seen me, you know. If I wake up in an institution again, wondering, please God, don't let me be here again. Before I even pull the blankets over my head, I'm in a cell and I'm like, please God, don't let me be here. And I pull the blanket from over my head and I'm like, oh my God, here I am again. So we're moving into that, man. We're moving into a second step. And if we understand, like, I got this thing and there's no human power that can help me with this strange mental blank spot, and they're telling me, obviously, I have some need, there's some needed power and I have lack of power and I need power and it can't be human power, then obviously we're opening up to whatever the conception is of God up. I need to have a conception of God, whatever that is, whatever that looks like. Doesn't have to be religious or I have to follow this way or I have to believe like you believe. But as long as I'm walking in some spiritual principles and doing the right thing, things can be amazing for me. So we're going to move into a second step here, starting next week and go into Saturday and We Agnostics. So God bless y'all, man. Thank you for attending, and I'll see y'all Saturday.